everyone, and welcome to Incorruptible Mass. We are here to help you understand state politics. So we talk a lot about how it is so broken, what we could have here in Massachusetts if we fixed it, and how you can get involved. And let me tell you, now is the time to get involved. We have 5 weeks before the primary, the Massachusetts state primary for all the state races. And because we focus on the state house so much in this particular podcast, we are going to talk about 6 candidates for state rep that all 3 of our organizations have all separately endorsed. And we're very excited for you. And I do mean you. Yes, you, that person with the headphones in your ears, you, to start canvassing, knocking on doors for one of these candidates or for someone who's in your town. You can always see who has endorsed them and get a sense for whether you want to work on their campaign. So before we go on, let me introduce my amazing and super awesome co-hosts. We will start with Jonathan Cohn.
Jonathan Cohn, he based here in Boston, been active with, actually what's wild is that August 1st was the anniversary, the kind of 9th year anniversary of my moving to Boston, and July 31st is the 10th year anniversary of my volunteering for a campaign. So hit 2 kind of benchmark dates recently. Has been active in progressive issue and electoral work here, and I'm also the policy director of Progressive Mass.
Oh, I love how you don't talk about your anniversary with your spouse or your birthday. You talk about when you first did some electoral work here in Massachusetts. That's amazing. And totally to be expected. So next up we have Jordan Berg Powers.
Jordan Berg Powers, he, him. I work in progressive politics. I said this on Twitter, and I want to say it again, that just this is the proof that you should be really kind to your volunteers, that you should support them, that you should invest in them, that you should care a lot about their futures and about their, because you could have Jonathan Cohn volunteering and you don't even know. And what it would have been had Jonathan had a terrible experience, would we all be poorer, in all seriousness. So let this be a lesson to you all about the importance of investing in volunteers. In my day job, which I am not here for, but I am just generally, but in my day job, I work for Mass Alliance, and so that is intersecting in this particular podcast, but just as a caveat, normally I am just here as an individual.
Fabulous. I am Anna Callahan, she, her, coming at you from Medford. Let's see, I mean, I really was not involved in politics until 2016. It's weird to think how my whole life has changed. And now I do nothing but this. I lived in the area since 2003, but really got caught up in the Bernie campaign, and that's what happened to me. So here we are. Oh, and of course, I work with Incorruptible Mass. And so our 3 organizations that we each work with, Progressive Mass, Mass Alliance, and Incorruptible Mass, each do endorse state rep candidates. And those campaigns are really working towards September 6th, which, by the way, happens to also be my birthday. But September 6th.
Well, that's exciting.
Yes, very exciting. But the much more exciting is the state rep elections and all the state elections. So for many, many state rep seats, the September 6th primary will be the important day. Whoever wins then is almost assured to win in the general. And so that's the day that a lot of these campaigns will really see whether they win or lose. And we are excited to kind of go through a list of 6 amazing people that all 3 of our organizations have endorsed. And I would like us to start with Raul Fernandez, who is running as a challenger. In the, I didn't pull these up before I started.
15th Norfolk.
Norfolk, thank you. The 15th Norfolk. Incorruptible Mass, we really want, our whole goal is to get people who are going to challenge the power dynamics at the State House that we talk about incessantly on this podcast. And we're very excited about a couple of things about Raul. Number one, that he really believes in democracy and understands the problems that we have at the State House, the dysfunction at the State House. The other side of Raul that we desperately love is his real commitment to bringing marginalized voices into the political process. He has his own kitchen table made up of folks within his district who have come from marginalized communities, and they meet regularly. They are part of his policy team. It's something that we recommend, that we absolutely love when people do. It's something he did before we even talked to him about it. And so that's something we love about him. And I would love to hear from each of you about what your organizations have to say about Raul or about the district.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly that this is a really progressive district. This used to have a really important, stalwart, somebody who, the sort of predecessor to Representative Vitolo was somebody who was really dedicated to making the State House better, to making change, to pushing, and was a leader in sort of progressive change. When I think about that, and I think about that leadership, and I think about where we are, it's important to note that, Representative Vitolo is basically, I think one of the things he's running on is like, look at all the things we've accomplished. But I think it's important to just remember that he's superfluous. He has had no impact on those processes. And so I think one of the things that people will sell you when you're talking to them about going along with leadership is access to leadership. But that's a false promise, because everybody has access to leadership, because no one is bucking leadership for the most part, except for a few amazing stalwarts. And so what that means is that essentially you don't have a say. You're not pushing for things. You're not differentiating yourself. You're not making the case in any places. And so it's not just that, we need somebody who's going to go in and care deeply about democracy, that isn't going to go on with the sort of low grade corruption that we all take for granted and don't think of as corruption because we're in Massachusetts, we're in America, it's not corruption. But it is corruption when only a few well-placed lobbyists have say, and the rest of the people's business gets pushed to the side. And so, it's not that the important thing for me is necessarily like, yes, it's important that Raul is dedicated to these things, but this is a district that should have somebody who is an outspoken leader on progressive issues, on pushing progressive values, on pushing progressive change, on making the building as responsive to the needs of the people as possible, not an invisible person who then goes back to the district and says, we're doing the best we can and look at all these things we got, but you're superfluous to those things. Those decisions are just being made without you. We can automate you and no one would notice the difference. And that's the problem.
This is related, slightly off topic, but Jordan, your comment about kind of power versus access reminds me of one quote that I'll periodically think of. Is I had been on the sustainability advisory committee at my undergrad at Georgetown. And I just remember the VP of facilities telling us, the students on it, that we did not have power, but we had influence. And it's always a useful thing to remember. They're not the same, they're not the same thing. And that structures that may give you influence on an outcome does not necessarily give you actual deciding power on that outcome, and that you should not mistake them for each other. And that's a good point. One thing I know that we were particularly impressed by is kind of Raul's being somebody kind of really a part of a kind of a network of progressive local electeds who are trying to see how on the local level, people can step up what they're doing around issues of let's say equity and justice, especially, and the need for that mindset kind of in the State House when thinking of not just kind of a kind of somewhat forward-thinking management of the status quo, but of how can we actually think creatively to make better policy, to learn what other places are doing things well, and to bring them here. And I know that from folks of mine who've interacted with him at BU, where he teaches, that he's very well regarded for the work that he does around education equity there, which is what his dissertation was in, and kind of like analyzing kind of like what the roots of disparities are, how they're reproduced. And it's like really important to basically to understand that if we're going to undo those disparities. And especially as Jordan noted, that Brookline is one of the districts that's very high information as a district, and it's kind of voters are pretty fairly progressive there, and it's a district that kind of expects a lot out of its representative. So it's one where you really do want somebody who's willing to speak truth to power, who's willing to push the ball forward on issues, because like if you can't get that out of Brookline, where really are you going to get that?
Yeah, which means like strategically, as we look at the entire state, like where can we pick up great people? It's got to be in these districts like this.
And I think I think it's important to note, just to back up what Jonathan said, is that Raul has distinguished himself as a leader among local elected officials. He has been an advocate on many important issues, and he's been willing to take tough votes and tough fights, and do so in a way that builds power. And so, I think one of the things that I was sort of bemused by is that, his opponent is Raul's, the representative has sort of like listed all these people who are, who like to go along to get along, who have also endorsed him. And I was like, that's like a perfect metaphor for the problem, right? Like Raul is willing to take tough votes, to push to push systemic issues, to push the city to try to be the sort of vision that it sees itself in concrete ways, and not just sort of amorphous nothingness, right? Like just sort of like, oh, we believe these things, but not in any practice. And so the people who don't like to take tough votes, who don't like to do real work, who don't like to legislate, are definitely not going to like that.
It's an important mindset. The way I often describe it is that you need people who are willing to fight to win, but know when to vote no.
Yes.
Kind of a dynamic. That like your goal is to fight as hard as you can to make something happen, but you have strong enough deal breakers so that you are willing to vote no. You're willing, and you have no problem voting no if the thing just isn't good.
Fantastic. So we're good. Moving on. We're going to try and cover all 6 of these folks. So Vivian Birchall in the 14th Middlesex. She is in the seat where Tammy Govea was most recently. And I'm not going to talk first. I'm going to let Jonathan. Why don't you jump in first?
Yeah. So I've found Vivian, all of my conversations with her, just somebody who's like very impressive and thoughtful. As the one thing that I think I particularly like is the way that kind of through the work that she's done with kind of, let's say, like local television and acting, the commitment to civic engagement and informing people about actual issues going on locally, given the fact that so often it's hard to find out what's even happening, given like the lack of local media in so many places. And I think that she has started even with viewing that from a perspective of like bridging cultural divides, because she's kind of as an African immigrant would get a lot of questions from people in the district, and she's like, you know what, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. I'm going to teach people about this, and then also bridge that into work around kind of educating them about local issues on the connections, as well as just brings a lot of important lived experience to the race. As I noted, as an African immigrant, I think it's also just kind of an important thing for, we so often only talk about the districts that are kind of the quote unquote opportunity districts, that are ones where the constituencies are majority people of color as the districts that can elect candidates of color. And it is almost kind of important to make sure that, to show that you can have strong progressive candidates of color winning in any district.
Yeah, I just want to say that Vivian is, by any stretch of the imagination, overqualified for this job.
Yeah.
She is she has been an international leader in her I forget which country she was. She was an advisor on corruption to the national legislature from her country of origin. She then became advisor to the UN on environmental and green rights, and was one of the leaders in Africa on on sort of climate change, an advisor. She then met her husband. They were in
At an
Hawaii
environmental conference, right?
at an environmental conference.
Yeah.
They went to Hawaii, where she again dug into really tough issues around housing as well as the environment. And now she has moved to Massachusetts, where she's raising her children in this district. She speaks, I think, 5 languages. Like by any by any definition, we as a movement and as a state are lucky to have a Vivian Virgil. And I think of that because there's a lot of mediocrity out there and a lot of people who don't who are so much less impressive, and they get sort of talked about as if they're equal to these accomplished people who, and I just think like there's not, I just wanted to lift that up, because as a woman of color, as a person whose first language is English, people get lost in the ways of who we think a representative should look like. And we miss some of the incredible expertise, lived experience, and just like all around amazingness of people. Because they don't look the part. You know,
I want to underscore one thing that you were just mentioning before that I thought was particularly impressive, both like as noted for back when she was kind of in Africa, when she was in Hawaii, and now in Massachusetts, that was wherever she lived, it was kind of the philosophy of what can I do? Like, how can I kind of dig in? What can I do to make a difference? Because it really just kind of she's been in action for a while now, but like as soon as she got there, was like immediately thinking of how can I get engaged and how can I make this a better place for everybody, especially the most marginalized there.
Yeah. And from our perspective, I mean, one thing that we train people, that I've literally gone around the country training people to do for years, is listening sessions, right? And it's engaging. So the thing that Raul does that I love, which is having a kitchen cabinet, having a group of advisors, close advisors that you meet with regularly, who come from, communities that are underserved by government. That is fantastic, but it also isn't engaging the disengaged. So to do that, you have to really run these listening sessions that, so few politicians actually go outside of, the way I like to think of it is, if you let people choose who is going to speak to you, then you will end up talking to the more conservative, the whiter, the more wealthy constituents. So if you, as an elected official, if you don't choose who you're going to listen to, if you don't work at that, if you don't make some selection as to like, I need to understand what the Portuguese-speaking Brazilian community is thinking right now, I need to go to them where they are. Right? That's just an example, but it could be anybody, right? I need to know what renters are thinking right now. I'm going to go to them. I need to know what college students are thinking right now. I'm going to go to them. When you do that, that's so unusual. It's unbelievably unusual for any elected official to do this, and it is what we need. And Vivian has had many years, if not decades, of experience facilitating exactly these kinds of listening conversations, because that's what she did when she worked as an anti-corruption person in Uganda and then throughout, in a number of other African countries. And to me, that is like the ideal person. And she's also a naturally humble person. She does not talk herself up. So she's just a lovely, beautiful person. I was just canvassing with her last weekend. She's just amazing. She's wonderful.
I just want to say that because I just think we get lost. I get really frustrated, and just the way in which we conceptualize how people can both complain that we at our current politics, at sort of the same old, and then equate lived experiences that are not equatable. There's just like no one else in this race that could compare to the just expertise and lived experiences. And so that to me just should shout from any page, any research that you do on her race. And I just think I just hope people see that.
Mhm.
I hate to jump in
Move us
this
on.
way, but like I'm going to move us on in 1 second. But I really think that money in politics is a huge problem, and I think that, you know, one of the people running in this open district is someone who like snapped his fingers and brought in $70,000 in a week, and that is someone deeply, deeply culturally connected to moneyed people, and like I just don't think that that's what we need in our politics. Like, to me, I know that people like to see success and people like to jump on board with something successful, but like in my mind, that is not what we need more of. We need less of the people who are deeply connected and culturally connected to money, and more of people who are deeply connected to their community and have skills at facilitating community conversations.
I guess I'll say, I think in this case, he did run a nonprofit. So as somebody who asks people for money on a regular basis as my job, I sort of understand being able to like, I would hope that I would able to do that as well. I think what's important is that whenever somebody is able to just bring in money, you should start to ask really tough questions.
Yes.
And they should have to be transparent about where their money's coming from, how they're able to raise it so quickly. Because I think you're exactly right. Like we need to know that you're not bought and paid for. I think about this a lot for other races, especially statewide races. You know, if somebody has it is weird to me that like there's a statewide race where like labor is on the same side as every corporate entity and and like privatization of public schools. Like you should ask questions about that. Like, why are we on the same page? Did someone make a mistake? Because someone had to have definitionally made a mistake. And so I think we should ask tough questions whenever that happens, for sure. Yeah. I want to say I want to move us on because I think that there's a nice connection to Teresa English, who is a teacher and also accomplished and sort of is thinking about plugging in. I think the district is really tough and different, and it's a sort of a different race. She's running against sort of a Trump ideologue, but I think they both have that sort of. They both have they're both accomplished and people. I think to Jonathan's point, people who dig in where they are and look to help people, and that really comes through when you talk to Teresa. I just like it shines how much she thinks of her run not as I'm running because I want to be a state rep, but like this district needs better representation. That my rep is so out of touch with reality. Somebody needed to do something, and as a teacher, as someone who's dedicated to this community, I knew if it wasn't somebody else, it had to be me. And that sort of attitude is something I look for in candidates, is the like putting people first.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I just want to underscore about how absolutely terrible the incumbent Mark Lombardo is. That when I was looking recently at the scorecards that Progressive Mass does, and I think it was like maybe one year he broke into the low 20s on our scorecard, and that was like, wow, that's a great year for Mark Lombardo. Of somebody that whenever, like even when you have bills where you get like a few Republicans supporting them because it's Massachusetts, and Mark Lombardo is not typically one of them. And so, and it's a case that's interesting as well, like with Bill Ricca, is it's fairly conservative locally, although it does vote for Democratic presidential candidates. So it's like, it speaks to that divide in how people often view federal and state politics in Massachusetts. But Teresa ran 2 years ago, and for a first-time candidate who got in late, she got in very late. She had a respectable showing, and I kind of just appreciate the mindset of somebody who's like, okay, I know I could have done stuff better in that first go around, but I had a solid showing. Let's come back. Let's learn from that experience. Let's build on that experience, because she's somebody who's like solidly progressive and good background in public service. So like has the commitment to kind of serving the people in kind of in the community and bringing more people into the fold in a way that a Mark Lombardo never can.
Yeah.
Because you can't represent people well if you don't fundamentally respect them.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely, I mean, we love Teresa. You know, aside from running against a Republican, right? She ran an amazing campaign last time, missed the ballot, missed the signatures to get on the ballot, but ran a write-in campaign in the primary, and then got 45% of the vote, which is fantastic. And you know, she's been deeply involved in the progressive politics in Billerica. We should, by the way, mention which cities these are. So like Raul is in Brookline, Vivian is in Acton Concord area.
Carlisle, yep.
Yep, and Carlisle as well, that's right. Teresa's in Billerica. And yeah, Teresa is just one of these sort of super down to earth people who is just doing what she can for her community. Really, I just love her. She's great. We're gonna try and step it up a little bit and go a little quicker through some of these candidates. So next we have Sam Montano, who's running in an open district that covers JP and where else is this district?
JP and part of Mission Hill.
Part of Mission Hill, great. And you know, Sam is, if Sam is elected, they will be the only non-binary state rep in the state house, which I think is really an important move. You know, especially given like generationally, it really talks a lot about how old our state house is, that, you know, this is something that really, you know, is so normal for younger people. And so I think that really speaks to something, but also like super deeply connected in the community, has been doing nonprofit work and you know, work with housing and environment and all sorts of stuff for quite a long time, and with youth. And so, you know, Sam is just a great person, like deeply connected in the community, and who has a lot of endorsements as well from, you know, Nika and other folks, Sonia Cheng Diaz and other folks who really, you know, I have and our organization has deep respect for. So thoughts about Sam?
Yeah, just to chime in on that, like the activists I know in JP always sing Sam's praises, kind of highlighting their commitment, especially on housing and work over the years, and like starting even like from a young age of getting involved in fights around housing justice in Jamaica Plain, a place where that's especially important, given that like it's gotten increasingly expensive for people to live in JP. As people who who live there keep getting gentrified out into other neighborhoods or out of the city. So that's kind of especially vital organizing. So they enter a kind of understanding that importance of organizing, as well as the policy element of it, to go in knowing what are some of the solutions that the community needs, what are the sources of funding the community needs, what are the policy changes, and how to work with the groups on the ground to fight for those, as well as more recent work over in Chelsea around environmental justice with organizing with Green Roots, in which kind of like not the district itself, but some similar issues, both of them being areas with large Latinx populations, of understanding the way that environment, so much kind of communities of color and low-income communities bear the brunt of pollution, and that we need to be making sure that as we approach environmental policy in general, that it has a justice lens to it, to make sure that we are undoing those harms and making sure that communities, especially those who don't typically have as good of access to public transit or to green and open space, do have that we are, like in our climate policies, making sure that like when we talk about solutions of, let's say, like solar panels and electric cars, that not everybody can necessarily afford that, but how are we making sure that what we're doing has that kind of low-income communities can access them, what we're talking about, and because we won't succeed at any of our goals if we don't understand them intersectionally.
Absolutely. And you can, you know, it doesn't take but a minute or two of listening to the way that Sam talks about issues to know that Sam just really has a deep understanding of how those issues affect different communities within their district. You know, it's really great to have someone with this kind of background coming into an open seat. So we're very excited about Sam. We have two more. I think we'll talk about Tara Hong. Tara Hong is running in Lawrence. And
Lowell.
oh, I'm so sorry. yeah, in Lowell, right? District entirely inside of Lowell. Those L sounds, sorry about that. And Tara is an immigrant from Cambodia, quite young, in his 20s, and has also been really involved and engaged in the community. And I know this district has a really interesting sort of background as well. Jonathan, you talked about majority minority districts, and I believe this is one of those, and
Yes.
a large number of Cambodians living in that particular district.
Yeah, and that's especially where it's an area where Tara has done a lot, especially around civic engagement and kind of community kind of empowerment with the Cambodian immigrant population there, to make sure that they are engaged in Lowell politics, particularly because look, with Lowell, as folks may be aware, Lowell politics, despite being an increasingly diverse city, the political face of Lowell for a long time was just like all white and largely conservative. And that for in local elections, particularly, and they recently finally, after a lawsuit, had to overhaul that. And it's that important thing to remember that fixing that structure to get better representation is only part one, because you need to be doing the work in the community to be able to have a base that can elect the person and who will show up to vote, as well as the better candidates. So kind of, as well as active as well in kind of like local environmental justice groups in Lowell, and is running against an incumbent who really doesn't do right by the community there, who's far more conservative than they there, especially around policing issues. That I just highlight that during the 2020 police reform debate, Ratty Mom was a consistently bad vote during that period, both on like the police reform bill itself and the various amendments that the legislature voted to. And if you're representing like one of the most diverse cities in the Commonwealth, you need a far better lens on public safety than just viewing it as very centered around what do the cops tell me public safety means.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. And Tara's fantastic, a young activist, somebody who's really passionate about the Cambodian community. Lowell has the second largest Cambodian community outside of Cambodia in the US. And so, it's a really important fabric, but the district is also very diverse. It's got a large Cambodian community, and it's got a large community of people of color. And I think people who are quickly being gentrified out, who Lowell is becoming harder and harder to live, especially this part of Lowell. And we need somebody who's going to care about that. Ratty Mom has yet to stick, sort of distinguished himself as somebody who's pushing policy, who's advocating deeply for the particular concerns of a majority people of color district at all. There's, it's very, it's sort of a very classic way in which he's a state rep, which is he goes to events, sort of shakes hands, be like, oh, great, and goes to the state house and only does what the speaker says if he shows up to work at all. Right? Like there's just no, it's, and it's like, look, I'm here. Look, I represent this district. I'm here at this event. But like, actually what we need is for you to take the lived experiences of the people in your district and advocate for that particular needs in the state house, which are vast and growing in Lowell as they are across all of this Commonwealth cities where it's becoming harder and harder to live for people.
Yeah.
We need people to care about that, especially if you live in those communities. And that's just not what's happening. And so I think about that. I think, that's why Tara's going to be so important to get there, because Tara spends time talking to regular people, advocating for them, and working on that. And it's going to bring that lens to the state house.
Yep. And then a couple other things I love about Tara Hong is he talks a lot about engaging people in the political process. He folds that into constituent services, which I love, like that he sees constituent services not just as like responding to requests, but he sees constituent services as letting people know what is happening at the State House and how they can get involved. I love that. And then the other thing is when, we have these questions in the interviews then where we put people in situations and like, this situation, what if, someone told you that you could only move your bill forward if you endorse the wrong, person who is not progressive, blah, blah, blah. And what would you do? And they were just one of the few candidates with whose overarching reply was just so on it. They just said, this is what is wrong with the State House. This is the thing that we have to go there to fix. And I loved that they recognized that the culture inside isn't just something to decide an action on, but it is something, in fact, to change. I love that. And then I think our last person, am I right that this is our last of the 6?
Yeah.
But not least is Heather May. And Heather May is running in Waltham. Really has a fantastic story of like 5 years of organizing her union at Emory University, Emory College, Emerson. That's why I shouldn't introduce people. At Emerson, thank you. I think my brother actually, never mind. Yes, really a wonderful story about 5 years of struggle organizing a union. And after 5 years, success. And that's exactly the kind of hard work and community building and movement building that pays off. That's the experience that we need people to have, because it's going to take time to get change at the State House and to get some of these policies passed. So someone who understands what it's like to work really hard for something and see the progress and then get there and win. That is a wonderful background, I think. What else have people got to say about Heather May?
Even still with that, coming out of the union perspective, it's just fighting that long battle to win, but then knowing that you have to be constantly on guard to protect the victories that you won. I'd say even with that, I think she does a great job as well. I've spoken to her class, one of her classes at Emerson before, and I appreciate the way, the kind of how in her classes that she kind of encourages her students to get involved in the political process as well and develop their own skills for them.
I think we have lost Jonathan for a moment.
Yeah. I'll just continue and just say I agree with Jonathan. I think the continued advocacy, the advocacy on all of the issues, and the current state rep there, Thomas Stanley, is far to the right of his district. So this Waltham is a forward-thinking, diverse community, one that's open to everyone. And so Thomas Stanley is currently in leadership, which means that he does exactly what the speaker says. There is zero distance between him and the speaker. He's pretty much anonymous. You could make him a robot and replace him with a robot, and no one would notice the difference. But before he went into leadership, he was consistently to the right of the speaker. Actually,
wow.
When he did vote, in earlier sessions before he sort of moved into leadership, he voted to the right of the speaker on some really shocking votes to make it harder for poor people to access EBT, punishing undocumented students for being undocumented, making it harder, making more barriers to poor people accessing welfare, making it harder to pay for sort of tax rich people, on and on and on. And so, he's consistently been disappointing in a district that has somebody who could have somebody who again cares deeply about the diverse community that's going there. And that's to mention again, without housing is a problem, both finding affordable housing and getting real answers, right? Like having a plan, having something that you're proposing, advocating for, fighting for to make your communities more affordable is something that's important across Massachusetts. But there are some hotspots, and Waltham is certainly one of them. This is a community of working people, people who could afford to have working class people who work real jobs, who work hard, and need an affordable place to live. And there is real pressure on Waltham that that's no longer going to be the community that in the future, unless real policy is in place to sort of to help people live in these communities. And he again is absent on this issue, let alone again a lack of any sort of visible leadership on transportation, on which obviously is critical to this district. And so there's a lot of people we elect who are nice people who are invisible to the process of improving this state. They rely on the speaker to tell them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And he is, again, one of them. And we can and should do better. Somebody who's going to take, who's going to fight hard, who's going to care deeply about this community, and is going to push policies that make people's lives better. So I just think it's a real easy, it should be an easy choice.
Easy choice on that one. Yeah, I think all of these are easy choices, but that's just me. So I am going to put the links for all of these campaigns in the blurb. Whether you're listening to the podcast or watching us on YouTube, you will find those below. And please, this Saturday, plan to canvass. This Sunday, plan to canvass. Find one of these candidates that's near you, and contact their campaign. Sign up to volunteer. Knocking on doors is the best way that you can help them. And we hope to see you at the doors. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week.